Okay, the today's topic is flow control in C++. So in our previous lecture, we have studied the basics of computer programming and the very basic level of everything we have studied in detail. And now we are going to study flow control in C++. In computer programming, we use the if-else statement to run one block of code under certain conditions and another block of code under different conditions. For example, assigning grades A, B, C, D based on the marks obtained by a student. If the percentage is above 90, assign grade A. If the percentage is above 75, assign grade B. And if the percentage is above 65, assign grade C. So if we are going to choose different block of code in a C++ program, then we use the flow control or use the if or else statement. So there are three forms of if-else statements in C++: if statement, if-else statement, if-else, if-else statement. So the syntax of the if statement is, so before understanding anything in C++, we need to understand the syntax or the block of codes of that particular statement. So the if statement includes if, and then it will include a condition, and then the bracket start, and then the body of statement, and then bracket close. The if statement evaluates the condition inside the parenthesis. If the condition evaluates to be true, the code inside the body of if is executed. If the condition evaluates to be false, the code inside the body of if is skipped. The code inside this is the body of the if statement. We will understand this concept here. If the condition is true, for example, if we assign a value 5 to a integer number, variable number of integer type, we assign the value 5. If number is greater than 0, then the block of code will execute. If that condition doesn't obey, then it will skip that code and it will read the code after if. So if this condition is false, then it will go directly to the next code. But if this condition is true, then it will read the code inside the body of the if function. For example, program to enter positive number by user. If he or she enters a negative number, it is skipped. For example, if I'm going to write something like if I write a positive number, then it will print it, and if someone writes a negative number, then it is skipped. Using the same standard procedure, we assigned a type of variable which is n, integer type variable. Cout, enter an integer. Cin, write an integer. So if n is greater than 0, cout, you entered a positive number. Okay, and if that statement will not be true, then cout, the statement is always executed. It means that if you write a number which is positive, then this will be printed and this will be printed. But if you write a number which is negative, then only this statement will be printed, because if the statement is not true, then it will skip that part here, and then it will print this number on your computer screen. So you can just pause this video here and you can write that code into your dev C++ for your practice, and then you can move to the next lecture, next slide. If-else statement. The if statement can have an optional else clause. The syntax as is. The syntax of the if-else statement is: if condition, block of the code, if condition is true, else block of the code, if condition is false. So if-else means if the condition before the if is true, then it will run this code. If that is not true, then it will run this code. We can learn from this how it works. So if the number is greater than 0, it means that if the statement is true, then it will run this. If not, then it will run this. But if that condition is false, that it will read that else code first, and then the code after if else. Okay, it will skip that one and it will directly read the else one. If the condition evaluates to be true, the code inside the body of if is executed. The code inside the body of else is skipped from the execution. If the condition evaluates to be false, the code inside the body of else is executed, and the code inside the body of if is skipped from the execution. So program to check whether an integer is positive or negative using the standard all those things here. See out, enter an integer, see input. If n is greater than or equal to 0, you entered a positive integer, else you entered a negative integer. So the program is very simple. If you understand the if statement, you can just pause this video here, put that program in your dev C++, write it, and then try to practice your codes here and try to follow all these protocols here. Like all those things here should be are in standard form, and you need to write all those things in your dev C++ in order to perform your program smoothly. So C++ if else statement. The if else statement is used to execute a block of code among the two alternatives. However, if we need to make a choice between more than two alternatives, we use the if else statements. The syntax of the if else statement is if condition block code 1, else if block code 2, else block code 3. First condition is true. If first condition is true, the code after if is executed, and then else if and else are skipped, and it will directly read the code after if. If the second condition is true, then it will skip the if, it will skip the block of code after if and read the else if condition, and then it will read the code after if else. And then if the all conditions are false, then it will directly read the code after else statement. Okay. So if the condition evaluates to be true, the code block 1 is executed. If the condition evaluates to be false, then the condition 2 is evaluated. If the condition 2 is true, the code block 2 is executed. If the condition 2 is false, the code block 3 executed, and after that the code after block 3 will be read by the computer. Program to check whether an integer is positive, negative or 0. In the previous example, we checked whether the program is whether an integer is positive or negative, but now we are considering positive, negative or 0, more than two alternatives. So we are going to use these statements here. Using standard this syntax, after this int n, enter an integer, see input, we are going to put something in as an integer. If n is greater than 0, you entered a positive number. If n is less than 0, you entered a negative integer. Else you entered 0. Okay, so there are three possibilities. If the number is positive, first it will read line by line. Okay, it will read see out, enter an integer, this the line will be printed on the output screen. Then you will put a integer and any integer. So if the condition n is true, try to understand the hierarchy from this block of code, how the if else condition works. So if n is greater than 0, then you entered a positive number and that number will be printed, and remaining all of these things will be skipped. And if you entered a negative number, then this statement will be printed, this statement will be printed, and this one, first one and the last one will be skipped. But if you entered a 0, then this statement will be printed, this statement, and the remaining two will not be printed. So this is very simple to understand from this example. You can pause this video here, you can write the program in dev C++ and then move to the next topic. C++ nested if else statement. Sometimes we need to use an if statement inside another if statement. This is known as nested if statement. Think of it multiple layers of if statement. There is a first outer if statement, and inside it's another inner if statement. The syntax is if condition 1 bracket start statements, if condition 2 bracket start statements, and then the bracket close. And you need to understand that the conditions or the block of statement works from brackets to brackets, and you need to close those brackets in order to run a program smoothly. We can add else and else if statements to the inner if statement as required. The inner if statement can also be inserted inside the outer else or else if statement if they exist. We can nest multiple layer of if statements. So program to check whether an integer is positive, negative or 0 using nested if statements. So using the standard all those things here, int n, see out, enter an integer, see in is this. If n, this symbol means if n not equal to 0. Here if n is not equal to 0, what comes into your mind? N could be positive, n could be less than 0. Okay, so if n is not equal to 0, then it will have two conditions. If n greater than 0, it will be the integer is positive, else you entered a negative integer, there is no other possibility, or else you entered 0, which is neither positive or nor negative. In this way you can use the nested if statement. If inside the if, you can work over here. So if you can divide those if statement, if condition into two parts, you can use the if statement or if else statement here. So this is called the nested if statement. So you can pause this video here, put this program in your Dev C++ and try to understand how this program hierarchy works line by line. Check whether the number is even or odd using if else. So using the standard things here, enter integer, C input n, if n divided by 2 equal to 0, C out n is even, else C out n is odd. That is very simple. Okay, you can just check this program in your Dev C++. Find the largest number using if statement. So this is the standard procedure of writing it. Int main, we are going to write the main function, and then we are assigning three different types of variable. The types of the variable is float. Float means the number which are other than double, like which is recurring decimal fraction, like 1.333, 1.345, something like this. We are going to assign this variable float type variables n1, n2, n3. So output, enter three numbers, then write three numbers. If n greater than or equal to n2 and n1 greater than or equal to n3, this double AND means AND gate. If you have studied the AND gate, it means that if it follows the both condition is true, then the statement will work. If any one of these condition is false, then statement will not work. So if n1 is greater than n2 and n1 is greater than n3, if two numbers are greater than if one number is greater than other two numbers, then it will be the largest number and it will be printed on the output screen. But if n2 is greater than n1 and n2 is greater than n3, then n2 will be the largest number. And if n3 is greater than n1 and n3 greater than n2 at the same time, then the largest number will be n3 and it will be printed on the computer screen. So you can write this program on your Dev C++ for your practice, and you can understand the basics of this one. So in the next lecture, we will study loops. Stay tuned for the next lecture.